Doug Kyde here with Zach Cox, rehashing some of what we saw during the first open Patriots OTA session. So Zach, what was your biggest takeaway Tuesday from their first practice that you've seen of the Patriots since last season?
Well, other than the obvious storyline that Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski aren't out there, the biggest thing that stood out to me is that the Patriots are going to have a pretty spirited competition at cornerback this summer, I think. There were some young cornerbacks who really stood out to me, especially Keon Crossan, 7th-round pick out of Western Carolina. I think he was probably I don't know if I want to call him the best player on the field, but he definitely stood out the most of all the players on the field. He had an interception. He had 2 pass breakups. He was really involved on the defensive side. And a couple other cornerbacks as well. I mean, J.C. Jackson, an undrafted guy. Duke Dawson, the 2nd-round pick, was involved in a lot of plays. And then Ryan Lewis, who spent most of last season on the practice squad, actually started the day opposite Stephon Gilmore. Obviously, way too early to kind of read into any kind of defensive alignments, and really even way too early to evaluate any of these guys because we've only watched them for about 2 hours. But from what I've seen on that first day, it looks like they have a lot of talent at that position, and it's going to be a very intense competition this summer. Definitely,
and their job was made a little bit easier just because Tom Brady was not on the field, so it was Brian Hoyer and Danny Etling throwing to them, and that leads me into my biggest takeaway, which is really just the play of Danny Etling in general. It could have been an outright disaster for the 7th-round pick. We've seen some rookie quarterbacks come in before and really play very poorly during these spring sessions, during training camp. Even Jacoby Brissett a few times had some very poor practices. Danny Etling was fine. He completed 4 of 9 passes. There were no major mistakes. There was no turnovers. I think that he looked a little bit better than you might expect him to during a preseason or during a game because there was no pressure bearing down on him, and his biggest knock really coming out of LSU was his ability to throw under pressure. So that pressure wasn't coming, so he was able to fire the ball out there without anyone in his face. But for the most part, I think he looked fine, about as good as you could expect to have a 7th-round quarterback. And I think that there were some improvements made from his time at LSU as well, because the other big knock on him was his mechanics. He went to Tom Brady's throwing coach, Tom House, after the LSU season. So I was impressed by his mechanics. He could probably still improve them a little bit more, but they certainly looked better than they did at LSU.
I agree. The mechanics were the biggest thing that stood out to me for Etling, because when you watched him on tape at LSU last year, kind of a mess in that regard. I know he said that he had a back injury a couple years ago. The surgery kind of messed with all of his fundamentals there, but he has been working with Tom House, Tom Brady's throwing coach, this summer. And again, too early to draw any kind of true conclusions, but from day one, he looks solid.
Yep. So we will be back here after the next Patriots OTA session, which is May 31st. We've got 2 more OTAs to watch, 3 days of minicamp, so plenty coming from a Patriots perspective. So keep it on NESN.com for all of your Patriots coverage. Follow me on Twitter at Doug Kyde, and follow Zach on Twitter at ZachCoxNESN.